Do you love spy books, movies, and TV? Then the Spybrary podcast is for you.
Hello and welcome to episode 260 of the Spybrary podcast. Today we're taking you to London. London is calling, and we're joined by the London spy, Mr. David Harry. Welcome to Spybrary, sir.
Welcome, Shane, and welcome to all your Spybrarians.
Well, a few of us know you because we were very fortunate in December. We had a Spybrary private group tour of your Spies and Secrets tours, which is a tour of Spies Central in London, Westminster and St. James's. Learn your own tradecraft, brush shoulders with Bond, and real life. I was trying to do my Sean Connery then, shoulders. And real life traitors. The tour route includes the St. Ermin Spy Hotel, where SOE was created, and make our way through the history of espionage, mostly factual, but with a nod to Bond locations, along with learning real tradecraft. Some personalities and events we meet include Kim Philby, Anthony Blunt, Ian Fleming, the Berlin Spy Tunnel, MI6, GCHQ, and much more. So we all thoroughly enjoyed the tour. And first of all, what I have to say, David, is that you had people rock up from different walks of life. You know, we had a former high-ranking, well, he was worked in the Foreign Office, so knew his stuff. We had
the usual cover.
President of the Liberal Democrats, who the very next day became Lord.
Member of the House of Lords now.
That's what happens when you go on one of David's tours. We had some former spies turn up and listeners, and we all thoroughly enjoyed it.
As well. Yeah, it was amazing.
It was. So your tour takes people through the heart of spy history in Westminster and St. James's. First question for you is, what inspired you to create this tour?
Well, to be honest, it was a complete accident. So when I became a tour guide, I used to be a vice president at Deutsche Bank for my sins. We'll talk about that later. I just read an amazing book called The London Spy, written in about the year 1700 by a Grub Street hack writer called Ned Ward. And it was nothing to do with spying. It was to do with using the concept of a spyglass to investigate the seamy underbelly of Georgian London, the crime capital, prostitution, everything to do with it. It's in chapters. I've got a first edition of it, by the way, as well. I won't say how much it cost me. So that's why I called myself. And suddenly I realised that I was missing out on a trick, because I kept getting all these inquiries from people. Can you do a spy tour? Can you do a spy tour? And I had never developed one. I had no, and suddenly, of course, I was an avid reader of all the classic spy fiction. I love Alan Judd. I loved and James Bond, of course, etc.
Yes.
And I had a book when I was a young boy called Codes, Ciphers, and Secret Writing, which and it taught you how to do everything. So I knew that it was in my interest anyway. But I thought, let's explore it. So I took up my camera. I just walked the streets of Westminster, particularly St. James's, stumbled across a couple of amazing spy locations, including the St. Ermin's Hotel, which, by the way, we didn't get to cover on our tour because we ran out of time halfway through, so we're going to do a part 2 sometime as well.
Yes.
And thought, the way I approach guiding is I like collecting artifacts to illustrate my tour experiences. So I found that I found out some spy equipment. My brother-in-law's father was in SOE in the Second World War, and so I had one of his original silk escape maps that I brought on my tour as well. Being a magician, there's a strong overlap between magic and espionage too. And so I had some ideal magic equipment that also doubles up as spy equipment as well. So I thought I could just turn this into an amazing experience. And my own interests, plus what I knew would be popular with people. And it's one of my most popular tours. I love doing it. I've now been recently commissioned by the Raffles Hotel to do a tour for their clients, coming up very soon as well. So, it's all coming together. I'm getting more of a reputation now, so it's feeding itself. And it's one of my main sources of bookings are the nice spy tours.
Absolutely. And London is often called spy capital of the world. What is it about London that makes it such a hotbed for espionage?
Well, okay, first of all, English language. So writers, it's the most commonly read literature in the Western world. But also, there was no spy function in this country until about 1909, effectively, following this disastrous Italian issue in the 1850s. So it was a relatively new phenomenon. It was also led by public scandal. So there was books like The Riddle of the Sands, the German invasion of 1910, Spies of the Kaiser, all fictional sort of made-up stories, pretending that instead of Reds under the bed, it was krauts under their beds, they would have called it at the time. That there was this whole thousands of German agents in this country, especially around Portsmouth, as it happens, because Portsmouth is obviously where we had our major docks, building of these secret submarines, etc. So all these books imagine that the Germans are, by the way, you couldn't arrest these spies at that time as well. So whenever these factional books talk about catching the agents, they'd have to let them go straight away and set them off with a flea in their ear, whatever. So I think it's just this whole relatively new phenomenon that caught on in the first decade of the 20th century. Then, obviously, with us being an imperial power, we had this massive investment in espionage, and we were at the centre of victories in both world wars as well. Plus the development of new technology, especially things like cipher, decipherment, the Enigma code, and that whole thing. It became just amazing interest to people. And obviously, as our imperial power waned, we struggled to find our focus in the world as well. It's interesting how the enemies changed throughout the James Bond books as they progressed different processes. So it's very much the Russians at the beginning and Schmerz, and it changes to more individuals. My friend, Professor Jeremy Black, I don't know if you ever come across him. Fantastic guy. His wife was at school with my wife. He's written amazing books about Bond. He's a real world expert on that, and I highly recommend you seek out his academic works on that too as well. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure why, but essentially we're just so lucky that it exists, and we still have that tangential. We're part of the Five Eyes mission as well. Yes. We still lead the world in cryptography to a certain extent, so we're still relevant and valid, and it's still meaningful. And obviously we've got these things that happen even nowadays in London that are spy related, live stories. We've got Litvinenko. We got the Salisbury Novichok poisonings. We got back 1978. It was the assassination on Waterloo Bridge by the Bulgarians of Georgy Markov as well. So these things that happen on our doorstep. We've got the Roberto Calvi, the God's banker, found hanging up underneath Waterloo Bridge, etc. So it's still active and live and surrounding us. So we never know. Are we meeting spies? And even in my time at Deutsche Bank, actually, I better not talk about that because I'm getting their pension still. So yeah, but there was lots of spies comes there as well. Right.
And this is why, I strongly suggest, yes, I've worked in the travel industry most of my life, so maybe I'm a bit biased, but for our listeners to hire a private tour guide such as yourself, because, you can go on Wikipedia, you can download all of this stuff, but London is teeming with spy history. There is so much. And as you just said, we didn't even make it to St. Ermin's because there was so much you were showing us. And we were all ready for a beer. We were exhausted, but that was because, you packed that tour with so much. So I advocate, hiring David to show you the sights of London, especially if you're traveling from far away. A lot of our listeners are in the US and Australia. You're coming all this way. You want to get the most out of your visit. Tell us about some of your favorite sites that your tour guests get to see on your spy tour.
Okay, so if you go to Carlton House Terrace, which is a long double vista of houses that were built by George IV. By the way, I've got an amazing artefact belonging to George IV, which I'll talk about later as well. So on that row, you've got two buildings opposite each other. First of all, you've got what was the former German embassy right up until the beginning of the Second World War, which nowadays is the Royal Society, by the way, which has been in the news this week because they're debating whether to expel Elon Musk from their ranks.
Really?
Yeah, he was joined. He made an honorary member in 2018 because of his developments in technology, and 150 of their fellows had a petition to say we must expel him, etc. They voted not to do it in the end, but that's the former German embassy, which was where von Ribbentrop was the new replacement foreign ambassador after the death of Leopold Hirsch, who was sort of an anti-Nazi style. He was there when Hitler became chancellor, and Leopold Hirsch's dog died in the embassy, bit through an electric cable and was electrocuted. And his tomb is on display right next to it. So I just love people, a lot of tour guides sort of exaggerate it a bit, say it's the only tomb of the Nazi dog in London. It's not. He was an anti-Nazi dog.
Yes.
But anyway, his tomb is there. Then you've got in the middle, you've got the statue of the Duke of York, who, not our dearly beloved, he who must not be named, the Duke of York, who had to retire from public life because of a sex scandal. How unlike any other Duke of York, because his mistress was selling commissions for officers in the army for 2 years, and then the trial found him not guilty. Then on the other side, you've got this building, which is now the ICA, Institute of Contemporary Arts. But following the end of the Second World War, it was the home of a very shadowy organisation called the Information Research Department. And their job, it was secretly funded anonymously, and their job was to create anti-communist propaganda. So the new war focus was now the Cold War, and it was Russia was the enemy, as opposed to Nazis before. And so this body would create arm's length, apparently independent third-party publications, all of which were secretly funded by the state to undermine belief in communism. And so you had like exchange students spending time in Moscow, talking about their diary and talking to ordinary Soviet citizens about the life, the reality of the Soviet oppression. You had books written by trade unionists and left-wing journalists, but all still committed anti-Stalinists as well. And they were based there. Faye Weldon was the secretary there as well, the woman who wrote Go to Work on an Egg, and Life and Love is a She-Devil, etc. So she worked for that organisation for a while. Wow. They were wound down in 1977 by David Owen when he was Foreign Secretary, because they had become a hotbed of right-wing radicalism and been infiltrated from within by these really sort of conspiratorial people, almost like right, flycatcher type of, almost like plotting against Wilson and people like that as well.
Yes.
So, but and I've got several of their publications, one of which I showed to the group when I was on tour. The other interesting thing about them is that's the group to whom George Orwell gave a list of those he called so-called fellow travellers with Stalinism. There are about 40 names on that list. So although Orwell was a committed, he would call himself a democratic socialist. But in the Spanish Civil War, he'd accidentally joined one of the groups called POUM, P-O-U-M, who I think were like Trotsky anarchist aligned. And they were viciously suppressed by the Stalinists, who treated him almost worse than the Francoists. And so he had a lifelong hatred of Stalinism at that point, which is why he wrote 84, etc., etc. But therefore, he denounced a list of people who then became blacklisted of so-called writers, even Paul Robeson. He named him as being a fellow traveller as well. So I love that series. You've got like two stories in a row next to each other.
Fascinating.
And you can see Horse Guards Parade from there as well. There's more stories there too. So yeah, that's one of my favourite spots.
And I took a look. They're hard to find, those publications, right? Because I'm fascinated in that kind of world, and I couldn't find any.
I've got 5 of them now.
Wow, that's fascinating. And also for our fans of TV.
Woodrow Wyatt was one of the people who wrote one of their publications. And he was like a Labour MP. Yeah. He then had a daughter called Petronella Wyatt. You may have heard of her. She was one of the multiple mistresses of Boris Johnson.
Really?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. He himself became a very hard right-winger as well. And actually was the president of the Tote. He ran the Tote race horse thing as well. So very, very light. But anyway, he denounced these left-wingers in the trade unions in a publication created by the Ampersand Press. So if you've got any books, look up Ampersand Press. That is the official arm's-length, secretly funded, ostensibly private publishers that was actually state-funded as anti-communist propaganda.
Yeah, and this is what I love about tours like yours, David. I learned a great deal. And I'm fairly well read on spy history of London, but I was learning lots. Like, I had no idea about the International Research Department and these books. I like that area as well. And fans of the TV show Sandbaggers will recognize those steps from that statue, because you often see Burnside walking down there.
They shot some scenes from Slow Horses there last year as well.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
All the outside crew were there alongside that row. And
if you go on David's tour, he'll show you where George Blake was interviewed from.
So it's just down the road from there, so it's a bit further to the along to the right hand side of the street in the park. And he was interviewed for 3 days before he cracked, and obviously, amongst other things, he admitted eventually to betraying the Berlin Tunnel.
Yes.
And as you know, one of the things I bring out on my tours are some really interesting newspapers, and the reason I chose them is because Ian Fleming was in the habit of publishing a serialization of his spy novels before they were officially published in book form. So I've got 3 newspapers that contain what are effectively the first edition, the first appearance in print of, it's From Russia with Love is one, I can't remember what the other one is now. And interesting, one of those papers I got out and showed the group. Yes. On the front page it also talks about the Russians had called a press conference in Berlin exposing this tunnel. So that's the actual day on which they announced the existence, the discovery of this tunnel, which had been betrayed by George Blake before the first spade had even cut the first sod on the western side of the tunnel. So they knew about it from the very beginning. And what's so fascinating about that as well is it's still not clear, I believe, whether or not the Germans bothered to actually divert any traffic away from that, because it was such a huge amount of information they gathered while it was open, years and years worth of data to try and decipher whatever. And so I believe that apparently they didn't even bother to actually remove any confidential data from that process as well, which is such an extraordinary story.
The book I recommend on that is Betrayal in Berlin by Steve Vogel. I interviewed him a number of years ago on Spybrary. I'll add that to the show notes as well. That's a brilliant book about Blake in the tunnel.
One of my wife's really good friends is a woman called Teresa Cherfus, and she's a BBC producer, and she specialised with her friend George, who was a director, in interviewing former Soviet spies in Russia, going to see them in the late 90s, early noughties. And George Blake has a massive programme all about interviewing George. She actually managed to get in an interview with George Blake.
Incredible. Absolutely.
It's well worth catching that programme.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually got to see a part of the Berlin Tunnel last week. So I was in DC and I went to the Spy Museum, and they actually had they've got a part of the structure of the tunnel. So, you know, I love all that. That's catnip for me. So it was great to finally see it, because there's nothing there now in Berlin. It's probably built over, or fields or whatever. And it's just fascinating history. And I really enjoyed on your tour. So obviously I go on a lot of tours because of my previous day jobs, but I love how you brought out artifacts as well. It wasn't just look at this building or this happened here. You had the newspaper, and there was so much spy history in there. So you had the press conference, you had From Russia with Love. There were other things in there as well. And then Alex Gerlis, the author who joined us, was really happy because Grimsby Town, his club that fallen on hard times, well, they were on the back page, a big write-up on Grimsby Town. So he was delighted.
he actually pointed out the whole tunnel thing as well. It was on the front page. But there's another thing on that front page too, which is on the left side. There's a visit by Khrushchev to England, and they were visiting the Labour Party, and there was a massive row that took place between him and the trade union leaders who were there, criticising the lack of freedom within the trade union movement in Russia. But the other thing about it was even more fascinating is that, as you know, Khrushchev made this secret speech denouncing Stalin, but it wasn't made public for quite a long time, to the West in particular. It was leaked by some Israelis, I think, to the CIA. And there was a brief gap of about 4 months between the receipt of this speech and then it being publicly known as well. And this newspaper is from that period. And you've got Alan Dulles is quoted as saying that he believes there is an opportunity for reconciliation with Russia. So clearly he was fully aware of the contents of this speech at that point, but he couldn't allude to the fact he knew it was there. But he was making overtures within this quoted article on that same front page that had the Berlin Wall, the Berlin Tunnel exposure, plus the serialization of the next James Bond book as well. It's an amazing way of compressing these conjunctions at the same time as well. And we now know more than they knew at the time when they were consuming this information. I just love that sort of thing. So other objects that I did see, I've got some spy coins as well. So there was a process at some point where you would hollow out the coin and open it up, put a magnet to squeeze them together, and you could put microfilm, microdots, whatever, into it as well. And there was a famous case, I can't remember his name, but it was one of the Gordon Lonsdale group was in New York, dropped one of these coins, and it split open, and a boy picked it up, handed it to the police. It made its way up through, and they found it was a secret code inside it. And that was part of his entrapment, was this accidental dropping of a coin that split open. And so I got two of those coins examples as well. Yeah. I've got some photographs as well, because I think when you were at the Spy Museum, did you see, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, did you see the spy scrotum?
No, I did not. I must have missed that.
So this was an experimental device that was created by the CIA. It's in the early 60s, I think. And only one copy was made, and it's on display in the Spy Museum, apparently. And what it was for air crew who potentially were shot down, might therefore be subjected to a body search. So they created this rubber scrotum that's slightly enlarged. Yeah. It had hairs glued to it as well. It's disgusting looking. And it was meant to be glued onto the air crew's scrotums. Well, men, I should say, obviously in this case, with a hidden little radio inside it as well. Easy. And the assumption was that they would not, therefore, be too heavily searched, and it would allow them to take this radio with them into captivity, whatever. Apparently, they did a trial version of it, and it was shown to the CIA director, and he said, "Oh, God," it was so disgusted. He walked out of the room saying he never bothered to put it into production.
Wow.
But it is in that museum, I've been told.
I must have missed that. I'll have to look out for it next time. For spy book nerds, as most of us are that listen to the podcast, you also got us drooling because you took us to a rare bookshop as well, David.
Yeah, this is called Peter Harrington, and it's a fantastic resource. There are two main branches, but the main one in Piccadilly is in Dover Street. And they specialise in rare books, not just any old rare books, the best possible you can imagine rare books. So they sold £6.5 million. If you get a sort of Shakespeare's First Folio, for example. I've actually bought one book from them in the past. I won't say how much it cost, but it dates from 1502.
Wow.
Written by Aldous Medicius, amazing. So they've got a huge collection of spy-related fiction, including many, many James Bond books. And when we were in there looking at them, they showed us one book which was signed by Ian Fleming to a man who was later his wife's lover. Imagine that. That was £96,000, I think it was, as well. So there's all sorts of later copies which are cheaper from the later first editions as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can just find they've got the first edition of Catcher in the Rye signed by the author. They've got anything that's on display in their shop that does not have a price on it is over £180,000. That's how and there's so many books of that type on display there as well.
Yeah.
When they had that Shakespeare's First Folio on display, it had a security guard by the front door as well to stop any smash and grab raids too. But yeah, that's one of my favourite shops in London. I knew that the Spybrary group would love seeing that as well, because it's not just the Bond stuff. There are many other. There's Dayton. And Green, all many fantastic spy examples of seminal works of fiction that they've got. Guard all the variants on the Bond franchise as well.
Yes, and what I'll say is it was actually my first visit to Harringtons. Obviously, I knew about it. I don't earn enough to buy anything from them, but because I was on part of your tour and you took us in there, I felt it was okay to go in there. I don't know if it's a strange working class thing or not. Same with, where was it? You took us to Turnbull and Asser. We went downstairs.
Oh, yeah, Turnbull and Asser. Yes, that's right. Yeah, so you got Jermyn Street, and it's full of shirt shops, as you know. It's also got florists, which make Ian Fleming's favourite brand of scent called 89. They've also got Paxton and Whitfield, which was Churchill's favourite cheese shop as well. You've also got Tramp in that street, which is a famous nightclub in which he who must not be named did not sweat.
Correct. Get me into trouble here.
We'll veil over that. But also, as I said, it's got Turnbull and Asser, which was the main maker of Winston Churchill's bespoke shirts.
Yeah.
And again, if you go to the Churchill War Rooms, they've got another one of these on display there as well. There are apparently 3 of these in existence. The third one belongs to the Churchill family. It's called the Siren Suit. It was designed. Churchill was actually a fashion designer. He was like a designer label was the Churchill brand because he came up with this idea. He knew that during the Blitz you needed to be able to jump out of bed and start running to your bunker or going up to the cabinet war rooms or whatever straight away. So he designed the onesie. It's literally it's all in one, like a play baby grow sort of thing. You put it on, buttoned it up or zipped it up, and then you were ready to go.
Yeah.
And they made them out of crushed velvet for him. There's one on display, as I said, in Turnbull and Asser. There's another one in the war rooms. And they became a fashion accessory. They became I've seen adverts for them in the war as these copy Churchill, and it's incredibly fashionable. Even now, I might get one and try walking around with it. Because he would wear them not just in the event of a war raid. He wore them to meet Roosevelt. He travelled photos around the world in public. Everyone else is wearing a military uniform and saluting and headdresses, and he's just with his onesie. It's just ridiculous. It's insane. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's something I would never have seen if it wasn't for your tour. This is the great thing about going on a guided tour is you get access to these things. And the same with Lock & Co., the Hatter company. That was fascinating, where they made the Bond hats and many others. Yeah,
absolutely. So Lock & Co., so they're in St James Street, just up from the St James's Palace. And they founded in 1676. And they've just moved across the road to where they are now in 1750. So it's the oldest hat shop in the world. And the outside has got this thickly layers of paint that's been accreting. So it's must be about this thick of paint that you see on the outside, glossy and done up. So if you've seen the film Kingsman, there's a famous scene in that where Samuel L. Jackson walks out of that shop wearing a top hat that he's bought to go to the races, in which the Kingsmen have inserted a secret microphone, which he knows it's there. So that's the whole conceit of it. But at the rear of the shop, you've got a museum in which anyone who has a hat made for them there, especially the hard hats that need to be specially fitted, is invited to sign a piece of paper which has their head shape on it. And they've got about 100 different signatures up there, including Pierce Brosnan. So we've got a James Bond on display there as well. You've got Mountbatten, you've got Harold Wilson, you've got Princess Diana, Emperor Hirohito, Evelyn Waugh. Did I say Mountbatten already? I can't remember.
Yes.
There's just anyone who's ever worn a hard hat from that show. They invented the bowler hat there as well. And they've also got, not really espionage related, but one of their clients who left an unpaid bill was Oscar Wilde. And when he died, they just wrote off the debt. It was only £3.30, but in about 2000, someone sent in a cheque for £3.30, saying, "Can you please pay off?" And they framed the cheque, so it's on display in the little museum. They've also got Churchill's own ledger, because he bought his hats there as well. First one in 1911. They've got that chair in which Churchill sat when he was being measured for his hats too. They've also got a special hat that was commissioned for Lord Admiral Nelson, with a special shade on it to protect his eye. It's absolutely incredible. I really enjoy it. And they're very welcoming to groups as well. They really enjoy letting people go in.
So you pack a lot into the tour, and you introduce visitors to both real-life spies and fictional ones like Bond. How do you go about balancing the historical with fiction?
Well, I often try to gauge for my clients. I always try to tailor my tours to what they're specific. So often they'll say to me, I want a mixture of fiction and fact. Some people come to me and say, I want to talk about Cold War focus. Some are interested in technology. Some want to get the royal stories or the Cambridge Five, whatever. So I can tailor the tour to reflect. But otherwise, I try to get them. I think it's more because there are so many locations on the route that are connected to real life spying. There's more of a preponderance towards reality. But so I talk about. Obviously, Ian Fleming stayed at the Ritz Hotel, where we start the tour quite a lot too. But also Roger Moore stayed in the Ritz Hotel the day that he was knighted as well, as a tribute to the legacy that connections to. So it's really based on the clients and what they're interested in as well.
Got it. And how can people book a tour with you, David?
Right. So, david@thelondonspy.com is my email address, and my website is www.thelondonspy.com. I'm very old-fashioned and traditional, so I've got no online automated process to book me. You just email me, and then we manage it that way. I prefer the old-fashioned processes. I'm just a one-person band, I'm not like a huge conglomerate, and I only do my own tours, so that's it. And you can also search for me on social media, as I am an inadvertent, accidental TikTok. I hate the word influencer. TikTok star, I'll say.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of followers there, and I try and post every day, once a day, and I often have many spy-related videos up there as well. So a lot of excerpts, snippets from my tour. You'll find them there too if you want to get a taste of what they're like.
Yeah, because it's fair to say as well, you do like I met you in the City of London, and I don't know much about the City of London. It's not a part. When I lived in London, I rarely went that way. So I'm keen to get on those tours with you as well. So everyone who's listening, if you're coming to London, this isn't just Spies. I'll put David's links at the show notes, spybrary.com/260. Check out his other tours.
I'm also a professional magician as well. So I'm a member of the Magic Circle. So I do some Harry Potter tours. Also, I try to incorporate elements of magic into my tours as well. And I used to be a vice president at Deutsche Bank too, so rather strange. And I've got a degree in classics, in Latin and ancient Greek, so I do Roman tours too. So a lot of variety.
Yeah, and I really advise our listeners, if you don't do anything else today, check out David's TikTok and Instagram and all of that, because you'll get an understanding of what he offers, but also you'll learn a ton. I really enjoy, I think this is why you're such a success, David. I always learn something and it's not like look at me like a lot of influencers, right? I mean, you generally share knowledge and sites, etc., and I really enjoy, you're one of the cool things about social media and reels and all that world, David.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us on Spybrary. It's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you. And as you can tell by my excitement here, I heartily recommend The London Spy. He is Spybrary approved.
Thank you so much.